The rain fell steadily, painting the streets with shimmering reflections of passing headlights. Marcus Thompson gripped the steering wheel of his old but reliable sedan as he drove home from another long day at work. The rhythmic patter of raindrops against the windshield was soothing, yet it couldn't drown out the fatigue weighing down his shoulders. As a mechanic and single father to an energetic 8-year-old, life didn't give him many breaks. But despite the challenges, Marcus always found joy in small moments, a warm meal, his son's laughter, or even just helping someone in need. As he rounded a quiet stretch of road lined with tall trees, something caught his eye. At first, it was just a flicker in his peripheral vision, a flash of red brake lights beneath a broken street lamp. Slowing down, Marcus noticed a car pulled over onto the shoulder. Its hazard lights blinked weakly through the sheets of rain. Standing beside it was a woman, drenched and visibly frustrated, trying to wrestle with a stubborn lug nut on her flat tire. Marcus hesitated for only a moment before pulling over behind her car. He knew how dangerous it could be to stop on such a dark, wet night, but he also knew what it felt like to be stranded and helpless. Grabbing his toolbox from the trunk, he stepped out into the storm. The cold wind bit at his skin, and water soaked through his jacket almost instantly, but he didn't mind. This wasn't the first time he'd gotten wet helping someone, and it likely wouldn't be the last. "Need some help?" Marcus called out as he approached, raising his voice slightly to be heard over the rain. The woman turned quickly, startled by his presence. She looked young, maybe in her late 20s, with dark hair plastered to her face and mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her hands trembled as she held a wrench that seemed too big for her grip. I'm fine," she stammered, though her tone betrayed her words. "It doesn't look like you're fine," Marcus said gently, offering a reassuring smile. "Let me take a look." Reluctantly, she stepped aside, allowing him to kneel beside the car. With practiced ease, Marcus loosened the lug nuts and swapped out the spare tire, all while making light conversation to put her at ease. "You shouldn't have to deal with this alone," he said casually, glancing up at her. "Do you have roadside assistance? Or someone you can call when things like this happen?" She shook her head, wrapping her arms tightly around herself. "No. I mean, I do, but they said it would take hours. And honestly, I don't trust strangers showing up late at night." Marcus nodded understandingly. "That makes sense. It's smart to be careful." When the job was done, he stood up, brushing off his hands. "There you go. All set." The woman blinked at him, surprise softening her features. "Thank you so much," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without your help." Marcus shrugged modestly. "Just paying it forward. Be safe getting wherever you're going." He climbed back into his car, leaving the woman standing there, watching him drive away. Little did Marcus know, this simple act of kindness would ripple into something far greater and more complicated than he ever imagined. The next morning was bright and clear, a stark contrast to the stormy night before. Marcus woke up early, as he always did, to prepare breakfast for his son Elijah. The aroma of pancakes filled their small but cozy apartment, and the sound of laughter echoed between father and son as they shared stories about superheroes and school adventures. For a moment, life felt simple, ordinary even, and Marcus cherished it. But as he drove Elijah to school later that day, something unusual caught his attention. In his rearview mirror, he noticed a black SUV trailing behind him. At first, he dismissed it. People often took the same route through town, especially during rush hour. But when the SUV turned onto side streets that mirrored his exact path, unease began to creep into his mind. Marcus tried not to overthink it. Maybe it was just coincidence, or perhaps the driver was lost. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. When he dropped Elijah off at school, he made sure to keep an eye on his surroundings, scanning the parking lot for anything suspicious. Thankfully, the SUV didn't follow him into the school zone, and Marcus convinced himself it was nothing more than paranoia. Later that afternoon, however, the unsettling feeling returned. As Marcus left the auto shop where he worked, he spotted the same black SUV idling near the curb across the street. His heart skipped a beat. This time, There was no denying it. The vehicle had been following him all day. Determined to figure out what was going on, Marcus decided to test his theory. Instead of heading straight home, he took a detour through quieter streets, weaving through neighborhoods until he reached an empty industrial area. Sure enough, the SUV stayed close behind, its tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. Marcus pulled over abruptly, parking his car in front of an abandoned warehouse. He stepped out cautiously, keeping one hand on the pocket knife he carried for emergencies. "What do you want?" he called out, his voice steady despite the knot of anxiety tightening in his chest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the driver's side door of the SUV opened. A man emerged, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket and sunglasses that shielded his eyes. He raised both hands in a gesture of peace, taking a step forward. "Relax," the man said calmly. "I'm not here to hurt you." Marcus frowned, his guard still firmly up. "Then why have you been following me?" The stranger paused, glancing around as if ensuring they were truly alone. "You helped someone last night," he began, his tone measured. "A woman with a flat tire. Do you remember her?" Marcus stiffened. How could this man possibly know about that? It had been such a fleeting encounter, a random act of kindness that shouldn't have drawn any attention. Yet here was someone clearly invested in finding out more. "I don't see how that's any of your business," Marcus replied sharply. The man sighed, lowering his hands slightly. "Look, I'm not trying to cause trouble. That woman, she's important. And so is what you did for her. Believe me, you've already put yourself in the middle of something bigger than you realize." Marcus stared at him, his mind racing. What exactly had he stumbled into? Was this some kind of misunderstanding or something far more dangerous? Before he could respond, the man added, "We'll talk again soon. Just be careful." With that, he climbed back into the SUV and drove away, leaving Marcus standing, there his thoughts swirling like storm clouds. As Marcus got back into his car, one thing was certain. His quiet life had just taken a sharp turn into uncharted territory. That evening, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at his untouched dinner. Elijah chattered happily beside him about his day at school, but Marcus barely heard a word. His mind was consumed by the strange encounter with the man in the black SUV. Who was he? And what did he mean by saying Marcus had already put himself in the middle of something bigger? "Dad, are you okay?" Elijah asked, tilting his head curiously. Marcus blinked, snapping out of his thoughts. He forced a smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah, buddy. Just tired, that's all." Elijah shrugged and went back to eating. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. After tucking Elijah into bed later that night, he decided to do some digging. Pulling out his phone, he scrolled through recent news articles online, searching for anything unusual, a missing person report, an accident, or perhaps even a mention of the woman he'd helped the previous night. At first, nothing stood out. But then, buried deep within local headlines, he found something intriguing. A brief article about a young woman named Sarah Bennett, who had gone missing 3 days ago. According to the report, she worked as a journalist and had been investigating corruption within a powerful real estate company. The authorities suspected foul play, but no solid leads had surfaced. Marcus leaned forward, his pulse quickening. Could this be the same woman he'd helped? It seemed unlikely. She hadn't mentioned being in danger, but the timing felt too coincidental to ignore. The next morning, Marcus decided to retrace his steps from the night before. Driving to the spot where he'd changed the flat tire, he parked his car and stepped out. The rain-soaked road looked eerily calm under the pale sunlight, but there was no sign of her vehicle, or anyone else for that matter. Still, Marcus walked along the shoulder, scanning the ground for clues. He noticed something glinting near the edge of the grass. Crouching down, he picked up a small silver earring. It was delicate and elegant, not the kind of accessory someone would casually leave behind. Marcus turned it over in his hand, a chill running down his spine. Back at home, Marcus searched online for images of Sarah Bennett. When he found a photo of her, his stomach sank. She matched the description of the woman he'd helped perfectly, from her dark hair to the red sweater she'd been wearing. His heart pounded as he realized the truth. He had been drawn into something far more dangerous than he'd imagined. Helping Sarah change her tire might have saved her life, or at least bought her time. But now whoever was after her could easily come after him too. Marcus knew he couldn't handle this alone. Picking up his phone, he dialed the number listed on the news article about Sarah's disappearance. A detective named Linda Hayes answered on the third ring. "This is Marcus Thompson," he began hesitantly. "I think I may have information about Sarah Bennett." Detective Hayes listened intently as Marcus recounted the events of the past 2 days. The flat tire, the black SUV following him, and the earring he'd found. By the time he finished, her tone had shifted from skeptical to urgent. "We need to meet," she said firmly. "Somewhere safe. Can you come to the station tomorrow morning?" Marcus agreed, though his nerves were frayed. As he hung up the phone, he glanced toward Elijah's bedroom door. Protecting his son suddenly felt like the most important mission of all. Little did Marcus know, the black SUV would appear again long before he reached the police station. The next morning, Marcus left the house early, determined to make it to the police station without incident. He had barely slept the night before, his mind racing with questions and fears. What if the people following him were dangerous? What if they tried to hurt Elijah, or worse? Every creak of the floorboards or distant car engine outside made him jump. But now, as dawn broke over the horizon, he focused on one goal: getting answers. Elijah was safe at school, and Marcus had taken extra precautions, parking his car a block away from their apartment to avoid drawing attention. Still, as he drove toward the police station, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Sure enough, just as he turned onto Main Street, he spotted it, the black SUV trailing behind him once again. His stomach tightened into knots, but he forced himself to stay calm. Pulling out his phone, he dialed Detective Hayes' number. "They're following me," he said in a low voice when she answered. "I'm heading to the station, but I don't think I'll make it there without trouble." "Stay on the line," Detective Hayes instructed firmly, "and try to keep them away from populated areas. We'll send backup if we can track your location." Marcus nodded, though she couldn't see him, and hung up. Taking a deep breath, he accelerated slightly, weaving through traffic in an attempt to lose the SUV. But no matter how many turns he took or how fast he drove, the vehicle stayed close behind like a shadow. His heart pounded as he realized they weren't going to back off. With no other choice, he veered onto a narrow country road leading out of town. The road twisted and wound through dense woods, offering little visibility, but also fewer chances for innocent bystanders to get caught in the crossfire. As the SUV gained speed, Marcus gripped the steering wheel tightly, adrenaline surging through him. Suddenly, the SUV rammed into the back of his car, jolting him forward. His tires skidded on the wet pavement, and for a terrifying moment, he thought he'd lose control. "Not today," he muttered under his breath, steadying the car. Glancing in the rearview mirror, he saw the driver's side window of the SUV roll down. A hand emerged holding something metallic, a gun. Marcus's blood ran cold. He didn't have time to think. Survival instincts kicked in. Spotting a dirt path branching off the main road, he swerved sharply, hoping to throw them off balance. The SUV hesitated for a split second, then followed, its engine roaring menacingly. For what felt like an eternity, Marcus sped down the muddy trail, dodging trees and rocks as branches whipped against his windshield. Just when he thought he couldn't go any further, he spotted an old barn ahead. Without hesitation, he slammed on the brakes, abandoning his car and sprinting toward the structure. Inside the barn, he found a rusted tractor and stacks of hay, bales. Crouching behind the largest stack, he pulled out his phone and whispered urgently into it. "Detective Hayes, they've got a gun. I'm hiding in a barn about 10 miles east of town. Please hurry." Seconds later, the sound of footsteps echoed outside. The SUV had stopped and its occupants were closing in. Marcus held his breath, clutching the pocket knife in his hand. For the first time in years, he felt truly afraid, not just for himself, But for Elijah, if anything happened to him, who would protect his son? Then, just as the barn door creaked open, the distant wail of sirens pierced the air. The sound of sirens grew louder, slicing through the tense silence like a lifeline. Marcus exhaled sharply, his grip on the pocket knife loosening slightly, as relief washed over him, but only for a moment. The footsteps outside the barn paused, and he could hear muffled voices exchanging hurried words. Whoever was after him clearly hadn't expected backup to arrive so quickly. Peering cautiously around the stack of hay bales, Marcus caught sight of two figures retreating toward the SUV. They moved with purpose, their faces obscured by hoodies pulled low over their heads. One of them glanced back at the barn, his expression unreadable before climbing into the vehicle. The engine roared to life, and the SUV sped away just as the first police car screeched to a halt outside. Detective Linda Hayes jumped out, her gun drawn but lowered once she saw no immediate threat. "Marcus," she called out, her voice sharp yet concerned. "Are you here?" "I'm inside," he shouted back, stepping out from behind the hay bales. His legs felt weak, and his hands trembled as he emerged into the dim light filtering through cracks in the barn walls. Detective Hayes approached him quickly, her eyes scanning the area for signs of danger. "Are you hurt?" she asked, lowering her weapon. "No," Marcus replied, shaking his head. "Just shaken." She nodded grimly. "We'll take care of this. Let's get you somewhere safe." As they walked back to the police car, Marcus noticed another cruiser pulling up behind them, its lights flashing. Officers spilled out, fanning out across the property to search for evidence or any lingering threats. Meanwhile, Detective Hayes ushered Marcus into the passenger seat of her vehicle, ensuring he was secure before sliding into the driver's side. Once they were on the road, heading back toward town, Hayes turned to him. "You're lucky we got there when we did," she said. "Do you have any idea why these people are targeting you?" Marcus hesitated, replaying the events of the past few days in his mind. Finally, he spoke. "It has to be connected to Sarah Bennett, the woman I helped change her tire. She must have been running from someone dangerous, and now they think I know something." Hayes frowned thoughtfully. "That earring you found, it matches descriptions of jewelry Sarah was wearing when she disappeared. You might have unknowingly become part of whatever trouble she's in." "But I don't know anything," Marcus exclaimed, frustration creeping into his voice. "All I did was help her fix a flat tire." "I believe you," Hayes said firmly, "but whoever is after her doesn't care about that. To them, anyone who interacts with her is a potential loose end." The weight of her words hit Marcus hard. He thought about Elijah waiting for him at home, blissfully unaware of the danger lurking just beyond their doorstep. How could he protect his son if he couldn't even protect himself? "We'll keep you under surveillance until we figure this out," Hayes assured him. "And we'll make sure your family is safe too." Marcus nodded gratefully, though unease still gnawed at him. As they pulled into the police station parking lot, he spotted a familiar face standing near the entrance, a young woman with dark hair and wide, fearful eyes. Sarah Bennett. She looked pale and exhausted, clutching a blanket tightly around her shoulders. When she saw Marcus, recognition flickered across her face, followed by guilt. "I'm so sorry," she whispered as he approached. "I never meant for this to happen." Marcus stared at her, torn between anger and compassion. Before he could respond, Detective Hayes stepped between them. "We'll sort everything out inside," she said firmly. "Right now, everyone needs to focus on staying alive." Inside the police station, the air was tense but controlled. Detective Hayes led Marcus and Sarah into a small, windowless interview room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on their faces. Sarah sat hunched over, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, while Marcus leaned back in his chair, arms crossed defensively. "Start talking," Hayes said, her tone firm but not unkind. She placed a folder on the table and opened it, revealing photos of documents and surveillance images. "You two are at the center of something dangerous, and we need answers if we're going to keep anyone else from getting hurt." Sarah glanced nervously at Marcus before speaking, Her voice was soft, almost trembling. I've been investigating corruption within Crestwood Development Group, a real estate company with ties to organized crime. They've been buying up properties across the city using illegal means, bribery, intimidation, even arson. I had evidence, photos, recordings, bank records, but they found out. Marcus frowned, leaning forward slightly. So you were running from them? She nodded. Yes. I barely escaped that night. My car broke down and I thought I was done for. Then you showed up. She looked at him earnestly, tears welling in her eyes. If you hadn't helped me, I wouldn't be here right now. Hayes interjected, flipping through the folder. And who exactly is they? Do you have names? Faces? Sarah hesitated, glancing toward the door as though expecting someone to burst in at any moment. Their leader is Victor Kane. He's ruthless, doesn't hesitate to silence anyone who gets in his way. But he doesn't act alone. He has enforcers, people who do his dirty work. Those men in the black SUV, they're part of his crew. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Why come forward now? Why didn't you go straight to the police after I helped you? I wanted to, Sarah admitted, but I was scared. I didn't know who to trust. Every time I tried to reach out, I felt like I was being watched. Then when I saw you again, when those men started following you, I realized I couldn't stay hidden anymore. You're in danger because of me. Detective. Hayes scribbled notes furiously, her expression grim. We can protect you both, but only if we move quickly. Victor Kane isn't someone who lets loose ends linger. As the conversation continued, Marcus wrestled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he understood Sarah's fear. He'd seen firsthand how far these people would go to protect their secrets. On the other hand, he couldn't help feeling frustrated. His life had been turned upside down because of a simple act of kindness. Elijah, he murmured suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. All eyes turned to him. My son, he's still at school. What if they find him? Hayes immediately picked up her radio. We'll send officers to escort him here, she assured him. No one will get near him. Relief washed over Marcus, though it was fleeting. What happens next? He asked, looking between Hayes and Sarah. We take this fight to Victor Kane, Hayes replied firmly. But we need your cooperation, both of you. Sarah nodded resolutely, wiping away her tears. I'll do whatever it takes to stop him. Marcus sighed deeply, knowing there was no turning back now. All right, he said finally. Let's finish this. Just then, an officer poked his head into the room. Detective, we've got movement outside. A black SUV just pulled into the parking lot. The room fell silent. Kane's men had found them. The tension in the room was suffocating. Detective Hayes sprang into action, her voice sharp and commanding. Stay here, she ordered Marcus and Sarah as she moved toward the door. We'll handle this. Before either of them could protest, 2 officers entered the room, their weapons drawn but held low. One positioned himself by the door while the other stood near Marcus and Sarah, shielding them from potential harm. Outside, the sound of car doors slamming echoed through the hallway, followed by hurried footsteps. Through the small window in the interview room door, Marcus caught glimpses of activity, police officers rushing to form a perimeter, their radios crackling with updates. His heart raced as he thought about Elijah. Had they brought him to safety yet? Was he truly out of danger? Minutes felt like hours as they waited, the silence broken only by the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Finally, Detective Hayes reappeared, her face grim but determined. It's Kane's men, she confirmed. But backup is on the way. We've contained them for now, but we can't stay here indefinitely. It's not safe. Sarah looked pale, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the table. What do we do? We go after Kane, Hayes said firmly. This ends tonight. Marcus exchanged a glance with Sarah, his mind racing. How? If we step outside, they'll come after us. Hayes nodded toward the folder on the table. Thanks to Sarah's evidence and your testimony, we have enough to bring Kane down. But we need to act fast. My team will create a diversion to draw his men away from the station. Meanwhile, you two will be taken to a secure location where we can prepare our case." Before Marcus or Sarah could respond, another officer entered the room carrying Elijah. The boy looked confused but unharmed, clutching a stuffed dinosaur toy tightly in his arms. "Dad!" Elijah exclaimed, running to Marcus. Marcus pulled his son close, relief flooding through him. "You're okay," he whispered, hugging Elijah tightly. "Everything's going to be okay." With Elijah safely by his side, Marcus turned to Hayes. "Let's do this." Under heavy police escort, Marcus, Sarah, and Elijah were transported to a safe house, a nondescript building tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. There, detectives worked tirelessly to compile all the evidence needed to expose Victor Kane and dismantle his operation. Photos, documents, and recordings were organized into a comprehensive file that painted a damning picture of corruption and violence. By morning, the story broke nationwide. News outlets reported on the scandal surrounding Crestwood Development Group, naming Kane and his associates as key figures in an elaborate criminal enterprise. Arrest warrants were issued, and within hours, Kane's empire began to crumble. For Marcus, life slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after such chaos. He became a local hero, celebrated for his courage and integrity. More importantly, he found peace knowing that Elijah would grow up in a safer world because of what they had done. As for Sarah, she disappeared from public view shortly after the investigation concluded. She left behind a heartfelt letter thanking Marcus for saving her life, not just once but twice. In it, she promised to continue fighting for justice, wherever that path might lead her. One evening, as Marcus tucked Elijah into bed, his son looked up at him with wide eyes. "Dad, are we heroes?" Marcus smiled, ruffling his hair affectionately. "No, buddy. We're just people who did the right thing when it mattered most. And sometimes, that was enough."